Hello everyone and welcome back to Magic Gathering Strat. I'm Binkabi and this will be the second match. No, actually this is the first match of this Modern Masters draft. So once again I will be recording the voice post game here, unfortunately. But that's just how life is. Easy mulligan into an easy keep. We got plenty of our colors, and yeah, we can't really ask for much more than this, I don't think. Some action spells would be sweet to draw at some point. So turn 1 island is probably my favorite sight to see, actually. As much as it pains me to admit it, I think blue is the worst color in Modern Masters too, so when they start off with an island, I'm usually pretty happy. I like to play a second basic to crack the bubble first, before playing the Demir Aqueduct. First of all, we don't need to play it. It doesn't really get us anywhere. And second of all, we're missing both white and green, so might as well fetch that up. It also gives us the opportunity to play Wrecking Ball this turn if we think that we need it. Let's say he would have gone with like a bounce land. We could have potentially Wrecking Ball it, so. But that didn't happen and we proceed. So a 3-drop is coming out and it's the Cloud Elemental. It's pretty good. Luckily for us, we have plenty of spells to use on it. Here it was a bit of a mistake to pick up the forest. I should have picked up the swamp. That way I could have cycled the Sylvan Bounty this turn for a plains and play Arrest on the Cloud Elemental. But that didn't turn out that way, so. Since we're not in a hurry and he somehow missed his attack step, I'm just gonna go ahead and Wrecking Ball the Elemental Lord. It seems like he's playing elementals, so that's probably a good plan to kill that. We drew Elish Norn, which will be good at some point, but we need to find another white source. But until then we have an Arrest and a Banefire to give us some time. And with only a Cloud Elemental pressuring us, we're not in a hurry. He just passes with 5 mana up. That's a bit worrying. He could easily have a count spell, which make the Elish Norn play pretty dicey if we don't do anything prior to Elish Norn. And I elect not to play the Arrest here. I could Arrest the Cloud Elemental, but it's pretty likely that he has something like Mana Leak or Stoic Rebuttal, so no point in giving him value for that. Plays an Alloy Mirror, which makes me think that he has Stoic Rebuttal. Since he elects to keep, he couldn't play it last turn and keep the Rebuttal up, so. And there we have the second white. Pretty nice for us, if it resolves, of course, which I'm pretty certain it will. Yeah. So since I've locked in that he probably has Stoic Rebuttal, I'm not gonna just jam Elish Norn. I'm gonna try to play around it if I can. Now I'm taking a bit more damage and I'm probably forced to take action at some point. So, since he once again left a ton of mana open, I'm just gonna go with, yeah, you could jam Elish Norn here, and if it resolves you get at least a 1-for-1, but I think the Arrest plays much better. It plays around something like Mana Leak, and it still gives us something to do. And if I'm not miscounting, we can play Elish Norn next turn and pay for Mana Leak, which is pretty good. So he's thinking about what he should do, and of course with 5 cards in hand he probably has something that he can cast, and there is no way I can play around a Stoic Rebuttal besides casting another good spell that he can counter before Elish Norn. Right now I don't have that. There's a Smoke Braider in the land, so now he has 2 cards left in hand. We drew the perfect card for the job. So I'm gonna start off by playing the Etched Oracle to draw out a counterspell. Since I don't think you can let this resolve. And as expected, a Stoic Rebuttal was the card he had in hand. And here I kinda jumped the gun a bit. But I did not expect him to have 2 counterspells, but as it turns out he also had a mana leak, which I could have played around by just passing the turn and play Elish Norn next turn. So unfortunately that was the case, and now we're pretty empty. We don't have a lot of gas left, and since we didn't have anything early to play, we haven't been able to attack for any damage. Otherwise the Banefire would be pretty threatening right now. Drew a Sickle Slicer, which is kinda mediocre right now. Would have been a lot better to have it earlier, but what can you do? So kinda surprising, it resolves. Which makes me think that he either has a burn spell like a Burst Lightning or a tempo spell like Vapor Snag in hand. Otherwise you would probably have played something last turn with your 7 mana. Turns out he has an Electrolyze and he's going for me, and that just screams that indeed he has Vapor Snag in hand. And that's exactly what he has. Now he can attack me down to 1, and I have to draw something to answer both his guys at the same time, which is pretty hard to do. I could also waste my Banefire to kill one of his guys, but he has a Guile as well, and now I don't think there's anything I can draw besides Vengeful Rebirth, but I don't think I have enough mana for that. So yep, too bad we lost game 1 against the Elementals deck, which I think is pretty bad. We don't have that much in the sideboard. Grim Affliction could be good. Shrivel could also be good, it depends on how his deck is composed. We could also bring in something like Thrash's Grasp, but ultimately I don't think we need anything. None of his cards is good enough that I would like to bring in a hate card. So a fine hand on the play. Vengeful Rebirth not at its best, but worst case we can return Sylvan Bounty to burn something for a lot of damage. So at the very worst it's a expensive burn spell. So we draw Sunlance, which is actually the perfect card to have, because now we can go Sunlance and Sylvan Bounty if we want to. And now we drew a Nest Invader, which is somewhat interesting. It doesn't really change much this turn, since I'm gonna use Sylvan Bounty anyway to play around a mana leak. It's no point playing the Nest Invader into mana leak. And as expected, a 3-drop that dies to Sunlance is thrown on the board, and now we have a perfect opening to play Sunlance and Nest Invader and get maximum value out of our spells, and at the same time play around his counter spells. So yeah, first off, play Nest Invader, and it resolves. Then we can Sunlance his elemental guy and play the Mere Aqueduct. Also making us capable of Sunburst 5 next turn, should we draw a Manta. We can also play Vengeful Rebirth if we want to. If he plays like a Smoke Braider, we could Vengeful Rebirth the Sunlance if we play something bigger, we can eventually rebirth the Sylvan Bounty. So electrolyze me and my token. Kinda bad turn 4 play, I have to say. Doesn't change anything at all, but I'm happy. I'm not sure why you don't go for the Nest Invader, but whatever. We drew the Knight, and that's kinda bonkers, because we can activate it, and if you don't keep mana up or kill it right away, we get to hit for a lot of damage, and with Banefire in hand, well, yeah, you do the math. It's pretty good. And he just passes again, which makes me once again think that he has a counterspell or maybe some way to interact with the Dragon Knight at instant speed. So I'm not gonna pump it in combat and just ignore whatever he might have. If he wants to Stoic Rebuttal this, that's fine. All I want to do is get a lot of mana for the Banefire, which will be lethal very shortly here. I gave him an opportunity to kill my Dragon Knight, but he doesn't appear to have anything, which is good for me. This looks like an X-Spell to me, but it's not, it's a Guile, but that's fine. I have to read the Dragon Knight one more time just to make sure that it doesn't turn into a 5-3 or whatever, 5-2, 5-3. But instead that it gets +5/+3, and that's exactly what happens, so I can attack without fear. And as it turns out, by pumping the Dragon Knight, I no longer care what he can do. I also have to read the Guile so that he doesn't have any shenanigans that I'm missing. It's not a card that I usually play with, so pumping the Dragon Knight, hitting for 7, which makes the Banefire lethal next turn. And since it can't be countered, it doesn't matter if it keeps mana open, and the Guile or the Guile ability doesn't interact with an uncounterable spell. Turns out that he should have played Narcolepsy last turn. Then I would have only hit him down to like 12. But I guess he couldn't really know that. Narcolepsy triggers, it's fine. Almost played the wrong land, which would have been pretty disastrous. Doing it for a maximum amount because it doesn't matter. Either he has something to interact with it in some way that I don't really think of, or he's dead. So I'm also a bit curious about the ability on Guile, and it turns out that my opponent tries a mana leak to see if it works, but it did not. Luckily for me, the rules are intact, and the Banefire is lethal, and we will proceed to game 3. Still don't think there is anything in the sideboard that's really game breaking. The only thing that I can think of is the Mind Rots. They seem pretty good against a counterspell deck. And yeah, the Crocodile could be... I mean, he haven't showed me that many targets for it. It's like the Elemental Lords, but by the time I get to sack something to kill one of those, it's too late. They have already done their job. So I think the Mind Rot is actually better here. So hopefully we can be victorious, so we can cash in some boosters. That would be sweet. So yeah, there we go. I think I've paused one of the videos a couple of times, and this might sound strange when I make the voice acting after because I can't hear anything. Kind of obvious, but so if I'm pausing the video and that doesn't sync with my voice acting, it's because I don't really know. I can't see that or interact with that in any way. Because I think it could have been this game where my opponents were pretty slow. Kinda looks like it, have to say. So yeah, Blue-Red Elementals is an archetype. It's one of the weaker ones for two reasons. First of all your best spells are also the best spells in non-elemental decks. Take Muldrifter for example. Every deck that has the ability to produce blue mana will take Muldrifters extremely high, and that means you won't get like a 6th pick Muldrifter very often. Yeah, so this is yeah, let's just finish that. The second thing with the elemental deck is that you really need to pick the prize cards first and then the engine cards, and by that time the engine cards could be gone. Anyway, this hand is unkeepable, 2 bounce lands and no basic. This hand is not very good, but I don't think it's a mulligan. We need 1 mana fixer to get us white mana and we're good to go, and fortunately for us we drew a Wayfarer's Bauble right off the top. And that's really good because now we can use both Sunlands and Arrest if we need to, and we already have 3 different colors to our Skyreach Manta, so we're looking good. Here I decide to go with the Nest Invader. It kinda doesn't really matter that much, but he doesn't have anything on the field, and maybe he just wants to keep a counterspell up next turn, and by not playing the Nest Invaders we're not getting very far. We drew Elish Norn, which is still a fantastic card, but not really at this point. So I decide to attack. I do think that our opponent is the aggressor in the matchup generally, but since we have so many good burn spells, namely Banefire, I think it's fine to go for the 2 damage, and as it turns out he wanted to trade, and yeah, I'm fine with that. It would die to Elish Norn in the future, but we already missed 1 land drop, so. The good part with the deck is that we have the bounce lands. If we draw 1 bounce land, that counts towards more than 1 land drop, so it's really good. Gives us time to draw even more. Smoke Breather will probably die. That's my assumption here. And we can also pay for Mana Leak, which is good, if we use the Sunlands. And I'm fine doing that. Also we drew a Evolving Wilds, which is kinda the best draw, I'd say. I would be pretty unhappy if he had used the Mana Leak there, because I need a token. Next time we can play a 4/4 Skyreach Manta by using the token. So once again he leaves 2 mana open, which screams Mana Leak to me. But we can't just sit here doing nothing, so yeah, we drew a Vengeful Rebirth, and that's kinda annoying. It's really good because we can return the Manta, but if we use the token this turn to play the Manta, we're 2 mana away from playing the Vengeful Rebirth. So I'm just gonna keep Burst Lightning up and not give him any value off that Mana Leak, this turn at least. And hopefully we'll tap out or something, who knows. Yeah, and he attacks and I can play my Burst Lightning, paying for a Mana Leak. If he has Stoic Rebuttal, then so be it. Turns out that he either doesn't have it or don't care about his guy. Once again, he's leaving a lot of mana open, but now since we drew Island, which is the absolute best draw, we can play a huge Manta and have Vengeful Rebirth ready to go next turn. And it didn't get countered, so he probably has something else. And as it turns out, he's playing Electrolyze again. And that makes no sense. If you're gonna do that, you want to play Electrolyze first, and then see if you can draw a counterspell for the Manta, but whatever. And from this point on, my opponent just crashed. First he played Electrolyze in the wrong time. Then he plays Goblin Warpaint on his Cloud Elemental and attacks. I'm not sure what happened, but it's certainly not something you want to do there. So drew another removal spell, and he's down to one card, so even though we can't play anything, as soon as we draw one land, we're good to go. And yeah, that turn didn't work out well for my opponent. I'm not sure what was going on. So another Cloud Elemental, we drew a Gruul Turf, which is okay. We can't Vengeful Rebirth this turn, and we don't have that many good targets for it. But I'm fine burning the Cloud Elemental for 5. We still have the rest, and now we have one more land drop to make. Vengeful Rebirth is good to go. So despite not having a win condition in play right now, it's really not that big of a problem. And we drew Banefire, so now all we need is to burn him for a lot. But as it turns out, we don't have anything great to return from our graveyard, so we're not gonna do that. There is a plan here that we should Banefire for 6, and then Vengeful Rebirth Banefire and use it again, but that's just not efficient. And if Vengeful Rebirth gets countered, then we have done nothing. He's a bit flooded. If he had a Cloud Elemental punching me, it would be much worse, but as it turns out, he does not. I'm fine passing the turn again, and he, I think, F6'd his own turn. Maybe. And as I said, by that Warpaint turn, something went horribly wrong for my opponent. Now I can start counting mana, because now we're hitting everything. So we're up to 11 mana when I've dropped the 2 lands in my hand. So that means Banefire for 10 is an option. It also means that we don't need that much to go right to win the game. And we drew an Etched Oracle. Pretty good. And if we by some reason should try to play a mana leak, we can actually Sunburst it 1 more, which is good. Should it resolve? Not too likely. No, it did not. But if it would resolve, that would be super sweet. So I decided to not play the Vengeful Rebirth this turn, to play around Mana Leak. There is no point in rushing, since we do have the win already set up. So that's why I didn't play it that turn. And we drew another Skyrich Manta, which is good. But yeah, I was going to use the Vengeful Rebirth, but I figured it's a lot better to do it this way. Because if he counters the second Skyrich Manta, I can rebirth that instead. So yeah, 1 hit from the Skyrich Manta and we're basically done with the game. Even though we never get to cast Elesh Norn, if that's true. I'm not really sure what he can draw. A Karn would be super bad as always, but we can actually kill a Karn. A Comet Storm would be pretty bad, but since he didn't cast it on his turn, I think that's fine. So we get to bash, and we get to Vengeful Rebirth the Oracle, and I'm doing this mostly because now he needs to answer my Banefire and my board, which puts him in a very awkward position. I'm trying to figure out if I can play Rampant Growth as well this turn, but I'm not 1 mana short of doing that. And it snaps Resolve, so now I can use it if he has anything. So he's pondering for a bit. I just can't imagine him winning this game, but you never know. We have a lethal Banefire, we have Elesh Norn, we have a good board, we can draw a lot of cards, and we have another removal spell. And it turns out my opponent figuring this out as well and scoops.